Thank you. Good to be with you all today. I am a practitioner of Agile, and hopefully that's the last time I'm going to say the Agile word to you all today, because I don't understand what it means anymore. I used to think I knew, but what I've seen in my 10 years of coaching has changed dramatically. Now, so I'm going to talk to you, this is 10 years of sometimes pushing water uphill or herding cats, right? So it's a view of a practitioner from the trenches, looking at what it's going to take for success to happen here, right? And so this is a very brand new slide deck. After Rob asked me to look at this, I've taken that point of view. So it's almost a personal retrospective based around that. As a result, I'd like any feedback or any comments that you have. You are my test audience here, so appreciate anything that you've got to leverage. And I would like to quickly turn this after that into a discussion, right? And get feedback from you all and answer questions rather than me just talking at you. Fair? Fair. All right. So let's see. Software development. I started there back in the day, did years of that, and then when everybody's started to offshore and they said the thing we value is project management, and everybody's hand went up to say, I'm a project manager. Mine was one of them back in the day. I went to a 2-day workshop over 10 years ago on Agile principles, basic Agile principles, and I realized this was the better mousetrap. Clearly it made the most difference to me. And I've been given a project at that point in time to run as a project manager, and I abandoned everything that the PMBOK had said, and I went to this way of working. The project was a massive success, despite the specs being out of date by a year, because we didn't follow them. We went through and did what the customer wanted instead, and we had 3-week cycle times, and we were working in a very visual fashion. I made a ton of mistakes along the way, and still it was deemed a very high success project. As a result, I've scaled this. I've applied this to large enterprises. And I've seen, and this is particular, as it says at the bottom there, towards the bottom, this is directed not to the small enterprise, not to the teams that can just get by with some simple practices. This is geared to the medium to large enterprise. And it's a personal view of what success will look like. Okay? I've seen success. There's a lot more to do here. This is by no means complete. The key takeaway I'd like you to see, and I'm starting to wrap this up now based on some conversations, is we understand the pieces of this right now. We've yet to synthesize this together in a way that is going to be successful to the enterprise. There's actually a lot of unemployment in the Agile arena right now. I'm one of them. I was recently laid off because the organizations are not seeing the value that they anticipated from this. So I'm going to look at that from the perspective of why. Why is this not resonating with folks? I'm not going to talk about techniques. So I'm not going to be talking about Kanban. I'm not going to be talking about Scrum. This is more about implementing business agility at an enterprise level. Before we go on, any questions or thoughts? Okay. So we have to understand the system of work. It's very much about that system of work. Organizations operate in silos, right? Because we're organized that way. We think hierarchically. Yeah? So it's like, I report to this person does this, and we do that thing. Well, guess what? Value doesn't flow that way. The longer you're at an organization, the more impact you'll have because you know who to talk to get things done. That's an invisible value stream, right? That's where your how work actually gets done. It's this tacit knowledge of the organization. So we're going to do that, and we're going to make that very visible. We're going to make that explicit. So we're going to form around value. It's been seen up to this point as IT only. Yeah? And it cannot be. It cannot be that. It has to be a business first approach. I'll come on to why later, but quickly on that. It's because we're starting to, this is the new way of working. I grew up in a small village in northern England, a textile village. There were 3 working mills there. Before then, people used to sit there in front of windows And they made cloth as wide as that, because that's how far they could reach to move the shuttle backwards and forwards across there. And then the mills came along, and it took out all of those practices. They all went into the mills, and these big broad looms came along. I see this as sort of the same inflection point here, where we're taking this away from being a cottage industry, and we're starting to turn it into that next era of the Industrial Revolution for digital. It's been seen as a nice to have, right? We could do this, or we've got to change that mentality. The organizations, in my opinion, my hypothesis, that started doing this well now will be the ones that start to survive. And people in the future are going to be playing catch up. The focus has been too narrow. We've made it this IT only. We've made it this the business says kind of thing, this chain of whispers that comes through, right? And we do the thing that it needs to be together, it needs to be cohesive, we need to start to join this up together. Anybody working on a single team right now, just isolated by yourself and having to work with other teams, right? Dependencies, large organizations. Who works in a medium to large organization here? Anybody? Everybody else is working in small organizations? In a medium to large organization, you need to a single team doesn't work. There's dependencies there. There's only two things you can do with dependencies. You either remove them or you manage them. So we've got to get away from that single team idea. And we need to link it up for executives from the top down. This needs to be the way work is done going forward. Embrace systems thinking, meaning this is a system of work. People talk about culture change, which is great, but you can't change the culture in an existing system because culture doesn't have a place to flow to. So we've got to start thinking about changing the system first in order to give culture a place to change to flow to. So we start to take this systems point of view and we look at how the system works or doesn't work and take the perspective of treating it like that. Where is the fault in the system, not where is the fault in the people, not where is the fault in the culture. That's our first viewpoint here. And then thinking about, this is critical, the last point here, thinking about the products that you deliver, not projects. A project is a finite, done once moment in time. And usually the way organizations do it, they say, I'll have 50% of somebody and 25% of somebody else and 10% of somebody from over there. And they bring the people to the work. It fails. It doesn't work well enough. What we need to do instead is start to move the work to the people who are product aligned. I'm sure you all you generate products for the organization. You have customers that you deliver to. Somebody should be saying thank you to you for doing your work. And if not, your work probably doesn't matter. Somebody's saying thank you, somebody's employing you to make sure you're getting the work done, right? So how do we get to that product mentality? And the reason is about product is a product is repeatable. A project is done once, a project is ending. We've got no chance to learn from delivering a project. A product, we move the same things through the system time and time and time again. We've got these feedback loops. We can learn as we do. And that's why we're taking this systems viewpoint. As a result, we need to have a relentless focus on the customer. We cannot operate in silos and continue to do so when we're in this changing environment. People are moving faster and faster and faster, and the only way that we're going to stay in business is to make sure we've got somebody saying thank you in the shortest possible sustainable lead time, from somebody asking for something to us delivering something to them. So we need to understand customers. I will tell you right now, most organizations are terrible at understanding customers. There are some that are very good. An old statistic, Amazon, this is an old statistic, used to release 11,000 times a day into production just to be able to test, and I'm sure this is not news to you guys, but they used to be able to figure out what turn something on for 15 minutes, get all the data, and then turn it back off. That's rare from my experience. Most people don't actually talk to customers. They don't go the Gemba walks. They don't do the interviews and observations. There's no task monitoring going on. They don't understand where value is created, frankly. So that's what we're talking about there. The customer pulls value. If we push value, usually that's one of the forms of waste, and we end up building excess inventory. So the customer pulls value from us, and we need that relentless focus on them. We need to know what the business outcomes are. This is frankly, I think, and this is part of my self-criticism. I don't think, as an enterprise coach, I've done a very good job yet of being able to describe why executives need this. And I don't think I've been clear about and found a way yet, and I want to change this conversation, and this is actually one area I'd love feedback on. How to get to that idea of, is my product fit good? Is my quality good going out there? Have I got predictable delivery patterns? Did I delight my customer? Am I aligned, is the product's going out aligned? Those are the business drivers. The statistics the metrics we've been talking about as coaches internally have been, story point metrics, and, we've been looking at feature times and those kind of things. An executive does not care how this is done. They just want to see the needle moved. And this is, again, back to that idea of product. If we've got the system in place and we're looking at the system of work and we're treating it as that system of work, we can identify the steps in it. We can start to apply data to it. And then we can change the system using some empiricism. Plan, do, check, adjust. If any Deming Six Sigma folks in the house? Yeah, a few. Yeah. Toyota's fixed for this already. Right? This is the dirty secret of this. We just need to do this for digital now. We need to get to this data-driven approach to management. Now, it begins with making all the work visible first. The work has to be visible. I've worked with Christy at Truist recently, and the first thing we did when we went in as coaches is to say, get all the work into the board, onto a tool. All the work. If you've got BAU, you're doing, and you don't, it's all just little tickets you run through, those kind of things. How often do you do it? Is it roughly 20% of the time? Okay, allow 20% of the time right off the top as you're doing your planning for the iteration. Don't plan for 80% as a result, or 40%, whatever you're comfortable with. But we need to know where all the work is at any point in time. The reason being, you'll have bottlenecks in your system. Every system has a bottleneck, right? If you fix for anything other than bottleneck, you fix for nothing. And so by taking that system's point of view and being able to look for those bottlenecks using data, we can start to identify and change the system. Again, this changes culture. Continuous learning and improvement with internal metrics. So we use these metrics and we start to ask ourselves the question, how did we do last time? What worked well? What didn't work so well? What actions are we going to take? Our team should be doing this at the end of every iteration. We should also, as a wider organization, again I'm talking medium to large enterprises, be doing this on another cadence around probably 8 to 12 weeks, roughly, in an event called an Inspect and Adapt. What we're talking about is a continuous improvement culture that we need to bring forward. My job is to create the container. After that, I should be working myself out of a gig. Other people should then be running it and be building, taking what was being built and improving upon it with a begin where you are mentality. As a result, short feedback loops are your friend. I don't know if, I've been a project manager. Anybody else been down that hellhole of PMP? Yeah, sorry. If you have and you still like it, I'm sorry. So, how many feedback loops do you have on a waterfall project?
I guess the milestone.
You may have milestones if you, yeah. But often back in the day it was one, right at the end. And I've done this and delivered at the end of a project and said, here you are, customers. And they sort of scratched their heads and tried to be nice to me and said, well, I guess I can use this somehow, right? Because there's no feedback in there. And feedback, I don't even talk about, you'll hear coaches talk about failure. I don't talk about failure. What I talk about instead is the learnings that we can generate. And if we're working 2-week cycles and we have a horrible iteration and we deliver nothing, so long as we do a retrospective and we understand why and we learn from that, the worst case is we're out 2 weeks. And it's these short feedback loops that all of the organization should be getting into. We need to operate, and again, Deming's fix for this. This is not new. This is a manufacturing process. These short, tiny feedback loops, listening to voice of customer and listening to voice of process, will get us to be able to continuously improve. As a result, my claim here, we're taking this from being a cottage industry to looking like a manufacturing process by making the work visible, by applying this rigor that we know works in manufacturing, and we are building the new digital assembly lines. Fair? Again, brand new talk, so let's move on then. I borrow this from John Cotter's work on leading change, and John Cotter has got this figured out. You need to be able to look at certain success factors and follow them through. I don't do this very well. This is a change management exercise, so I would suggest for this that you bring in somebody highly skilled in change management. The first thing is to find that sense of urgency. What's your burning platform? What is keeping the executives up at night? What stops them? What's the biggest issue? If you solve for something small, you really don't solve for anything big. And this is a big change to an organization to take this on. This is non-trivial, right? We are talking a fundamental transformation in ways of work, in the system of work. So we need to make sure we're doing it for something meaningful. So we need that sense of urgency, that burning platform. Build a guiding coalition is the next thing that Cotter says. And then, I don't know any other way of doing this anymore, other than C-suite needs to be involved. And not just involved, but creating the vision and communicating clearly and often about that vision. I've tried the other way. I've tried grassroots. You get to a certain level and it stops. The organizational inertia is too great to overcome at a certain point in time. And you see it being very powerful up to a certain point, but I think more is required because I think this is the future of work. You need to be aligned and committed to this fundamental change. People need to say this early and often and continuously and explain why the value is there and we're moving towards it. It begins with vision, right? It begins with the idea of the why of this in a way that's communicated to the organization, that everybody understands the why behind it. The reason being for that is that people can look back at what they're doing and say, does this align to vision? If not, we shouldn't be doing it. So your vision is critical and needs to be very clear as a result. Who can do that? Your C-suite, your executives. So vision created and shared often. Empowered and aligned people. Empowerment's a scary word for a lot of people at a certain level in an organization, right? I've had people, executives leaning into direct team conversations where they've had no business being there at all because of this micromanagement. And I don't blame them because I think it comes from a sense of I don't know what's going on because the work isn't visible. I don't know, and my job's on the line here. And so people, by making the work visible, by being able to have these data-driven conversations, by gaining predictable delivery patterns, we can start to change this. As a result, we empower people with that sense of vision and trusting that they're going to follow through. I don't think anybody shows up thinking I'm going to screw up today. Everybody brings their A game to work most days, right? And then aligning them so they're empowered and they're aligned. Celebrate the wins often. This is a mea culpa. On my part, I think I failed to do this up till now. I'm not very good at change management, but this is where you need to lean in and you celebrate every little thing that happens. I talk about putting momentum into the flywheel, right? You give it another little flick and another little flick and another little flick until the flywheel just goes by itself. But that's what I'm talking about here in the celebrate wins. As often as you can and as loudly as you can. Consolidate. Claim the big win. We've talked about the burning platform, the sense of urgency required. Once you've done that and you've proved it works, go again. And go again. And lead with a vision every single time. Fundamentally, I believe this will change organizations. When you've got predictable delivery patterns in place, all the work is visible on a board, you can see where the work is at any level in the organization at any point in time just by referencing one single tool, be able to see whether you're ahead, behind, be able to link it, most importantly, to the strategy of the organization. I've asked senior leaders, can you link strategy to execution? And the answer is unfailingly no. They've no idea usually what's going on in their delivery teams. So consolidate, keep going, lead with vision, anchor the changes, make sure the changes stay. This is where the culture starts to shift. You've changed the system of work, now anchor them. Make this the new way of working. I heard a statistic now, they also say 80% of statistics are made up on the spot, but I heard a statistic that said you need 12% of an organization aligned one way in order to overcome the organizational inertia. So this is where anchoring the changes are so important. And then fundamentally a systems first approach. The culture cannot change unless the system has changed first. Okay? I can keep going on one more slide, but questions or comments at this point in time? Again, I want this to be as, yeah, please.
One thing for us, we went through a digital transformation.
Yep.
And for us, the way to build the culture, to change the culture was relentless training, role-based training. Because a lot of people don't know what to do. They have good intentions, but they don't really know what's expected of them. So you're right, everything you've said so far, I totally resonate. C-suite, having that leadership, but underneath that, it's about training the staff, and once they begin to see how it works, that builds the momentum for delivering value at the end. For sure.
I would recommend hiring somebody that's been and done this and knows what the pitfalls are. Yeah, I boxed my shins many times against large organizations and what it takes for success. That's a separate discussion. I mean, there's patterns for implementing this as well. I'm talking like broad, here what I'm talking about is a broad brush, back to basics for large and medium organizations that want to fundamentally change their ways of working. I agree though. Anything else? Anybody else before I move on?
I think one of the things that, I've seen with companies is they might not want to wait for the change to happen because it's not like you just go in there and you change things, right? People don't want to change. They fight back.
Exactly.
It's hard. Like, you have to convince somebody with proof, but it takes time to build the proof to be able to get everybody's buy-in.
I think that's where the C-suite comes in, that
Yep.
says, we're gonna do this.
Yep.
And then that sort of forces people into the training, and there's still resistance, even after the training. So, I don't wanna get down a rabbit hole here, but we did it for a government organization, a large government organization. I gotta say, I would stack them up against any commercial developer, because they actually had a development and operations group that was siloed, which you were talking about earlier. Now they're sideways, focused on delivering value to their customers.
Right.
And they have different agile release trains.
Yep.
And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
People are empowered by the fact that they are developing and planning and prioritizing the work that they're gonna do for the next 3 months.
I've just been working with Christy prior to leaving Truist, and we did exactly that. And I boast about Christy and her teams. I think the only thing we can't change, frankly, is mindset. If you think it's not going to work, I can guarantee it's not going to work. If you've got that guiding coalition, you've got your C-suite involved, and you're pushing forward to this, the mindset will come. Again, a change management approach is required. It's not a nice to have for a large transformation. And it's seen as nice to have often. Yeah.
So, going back to what Christy was saying,
Yep.
isn't that where that 12% of the population comes in to help change that mindset? And that, and it seems like the first 4 items up there are really all C-suite related. To build that sense of urgency, you've got to have the C-suite behind it.
Yep.
Guiding coalition.
Yep.
Vision. Seems like all of that is definitely like in the C-suite. Everything else below that is middle management and like principal level. But
And bringing the rest of the folks along as well. Train everybody, make sure everybody's speaking the same language, making sure that you've got the path forward clear, the visions communicate. But yes, it has to happen that way. I think I've skipped these steps before, frankly, and I've let the organizations off the hook is really what I've done. I've allowed them to just go ahead and they said, well, it's not going to work here, we can't do that. And then my pride has kicked in, and I said, I'll show you it'll work. And it does, to a certain level. The grassroots usually tend to love this and adopt for it. They think this is fantastic because now they've got clarity of backlog. Now they understand what they're doing. Now they're actually communicating with, turning that strategy into execution. It's a brave person at that level of the organization, at the C level, who's got there through, well, they're all type A drivers, right, these folks? I understand that. They're very bright, they're very capable. And to come in and tell them, you're actually doing it wrong, you need to be able to have some humility in this to be able to recognize it. And the path is littered in the past with organizations that have failed to do so, right? Apple is the largest watch manufacturer in the world now. Yeah. Netflix, Reed Hastings got started because his wife got pissed because he wasn't returning the tapes to Blockbuster quick enough. Right? So I don't think this is an option anymore to leave this off the table. But these folks have yet to buy in. These folks have yet to do this. And I blame the communication methods that we've been using up to this point as coaches. I don't think we've solved this yet. And I think there's a conversation still to be had around this. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of the focus for a lot of these techniques, from my understanding, is on the delivered value in organization to all of its stakeholders. But a lot of the documentation I've seen on this really doesn't focus on the whole of the stakeholders, only a subset. Like, for example, the employees and the environment seem to be very underrepresented in those organizations. If your employees are not being treated as a sort like a target of value, I don't see how a lot of these are going to be as effective, because if you're having a data-centric approach, but you're not collecting appropriate and truly effective data on like all of those stakeholders, eventually you will go like be led wrong.
We're in violent agreement. I couldn't agree with you more. One of the words that drives me absolutely up the wall, and I hope if you guys are doing this, I hope you take this away. If you take one thing away from today, if you talk about people as resources, please stop that. Because people aren't resources. These people are making college payments, they've got heartbeats, they've got like dogs that need to eat at 5 o'clock and they have to rush home. Resources are photocopiers and, switches and whatever else. Those are resources. And to your point, we have to get to this people-centric culture. And we don't do that. But we've got to get there. Now, some cultures do, some absolutely do. we can do it. There are tools available in the industry, which is there's something called Agility Health that looks at teams and starts to ask them to represent themselves. How are you doing? How are you, and a good organization will be listening to those, again, short feedback loops, right? Looking for those signals and looking for ways to improve. If anybody wants to take an hour of their time for something I think is one of the most worthwhile podcasts I've ever listened to in my life, This American Life is a collaboration between GM and Toyota. They're in California. It's called NUMMI, N-U-M-M-I. And it was where GM tried to learn from Toyota. It's a miserable failure. They took some of the, just quickly though on that, they took some of the American folks across to Japan. And one of the guys, is a big American dude. He couldn't reach up because his hands were too big into the model. So he told somebody about it, and 2 hours later, somebody produced a longer wrench for him to allow that operation to occur. That's a short feedback loop. And that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about those feedback loops and respect for people. And I agree. Anything else? Anybody else?
One thing that also helped,
Yep.
we tracked Jira and features and stories in Jira, and we also used Jira Align, which provided the metrics on how we were doing. Before we had Jira Align, it was just a cheap address, vocalizing, here's what the issue is. But once we got a tool in there,
You've got to put the tool in.
It became about the data.
That's right.
About the person.
That's right. A single pane of glass.
Fascinated by, I see we're having an issue here. What's the problem? How do we fix it? It changed the focus.
It does, because the work's visible. So now you're not talking about, well, Bob didn't get that done.
Right.
We were talking about what's the blockage in the system that stopped Bob getting that done. Where did the system fail? Sometimes, people just aren't going to work out. But begin with the system first, because I believe everybody shows up wanting to do their best work every day. Sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah. So, in your experience, like going from whatever system someone is using for management to Agile is generally a huge shift.
Yeah.
It's a giant sea change process. Have you seen success with folks going like Scrum Fall in between and trying to get buy-in with sort of doing a hybrid of waterfall and Scrum and kind of taking what works best for the company in either of those in that sense? Have you seen a lot of success, or have you seen it more of like, well, that's kind of a waste of time?
Well, let me see if I can bring this on. This comes to this point here. Begin where you are. You can only do so much to begin with. So if all you can do is that kind of Scrum Fall pattern, yes, don't make it your end state. Have that vision created that says we're going to get to this and move towards it, but don't stay there. But if it's all you can do at that point in time, okay. But it shouldn't be your end goal. Fair? So just to finish this slide up, lean concepts apply. Frankly, I believe lean applies more than when we talk about the A word, right? I feel like I should have a swear jar here or something for putting money. So when I say Agile, what I'm talking about these days is the delivery, the engine underneath it, right? That's what gets it all humming along. You need that. You need your delivery teams operating in those ways. It works. We know it works. And it's not enough for a large enterprise. So you need to look at it through these concepts of lean, or Toyota Production System, as it used to be frankly known as. Toyota solved for this already, right? We're looking at these 8 forms of waste here. Where do they occur? Where's the pull of the customer coming from, right? We know how to do this. We just haven't done it yet in the digital world very well. So Scrum Fall, right? Or whatever it is. Begin where you are, accept where you are, don't accept that as your end destination, and prioritize the changes. You can't do everything all at once. There's only certain things you can do along the way, but prioritize them. You can prioritize a backlog of change just like you can prioritize a backlog of work. Talked about this one already. Customers consume value, so we need that customer-centric mindset. Projects to product, we've talked about. In fact, if anybody wants to read a really good book around this, Somebody's actually written what I consider a blueprint for the modern enterprise. Mick Kirsten, Project to Product, and Mick's basically laid out exactly what is MIK. It's laid out exactly what is required here. Form teams around value, that customer centricity. Form teams around value. Establish that culture of continuous improvement. I come in, I help build the systems for you. You don't want me to hang around for a long time afterwards. You need the system to be continuously improving along the way. And that's what we're talking about. And you establish that there's certain mechanisms that you can do. Put them on a cadence. Every 2 weeks we do a retrospective. Every 3 months we do an inspect and adapt. We're a learning organization. And the last one, the beginning point, is make all work visible. So this is the conclusion. We'll turn this over and we can go back to anything you like after this. This is a fundamental change. Nothing about this is easy. And if somebody tells you that it is, they're probably selling you something you don't want to buy, I would suggest, at least in my experience. Does anybody despair.com back in the day? For those people who've been around, if you're not part of the solution, there's good money to be made in consultancy, right? So it has to have the right mindset for change. That's what we've been talking about here. If you don't have that mindset, you're not going to be successful. Everything else is possible. I'd recommend bringing in skilled practitioners to do this. You can do it alone, but I wouldn't, unless you're a very small shop and you're just implementing some simple patterns. Commit to a change management approach. You cannot do this without change management. You can try, this is a hard learning for me. This is one of my mea culpas here. And again, I've said this often, change the system, the culture will follow. Every organization is now a software organization, period. We can do whatever you like. Any questions now? Hopefully I've provoked some thoughts and curiosity. That's my goal here. And this is brand new, so I'm looking for feedback as well. Yeah, please.
Scaled Agile framework is, I'm a state practice consultant, but the Scaled Agile framework is what our customer, the C-suite, that's what he adopted, and that's the training that we went through. And that was really changing the system, and the relentless training is what led to the culture change. It does work.
I'm SPC certified. I think it's a magnificent toolbox, and I would leave it there. And somebody that's going to give you all of it straight away, you've got to be careful of, because you need the right mentality and right approach to it. We're doing this because you need a reason to do some of those things, and this is where I would go to, making sure you've got somebody in that understands why this and is aligned with you. Yeah, got a question?
How do you, so no business starts as a large business. If someone is like a small organization, just 2 or 3 people, and building up, where should they start so that they start out on the right foot towards a quality system for managing work, so they don't start out in a place that leads them to needing a radical shift later?
Fair. Are you co-located? Are you talking about a co-located team? Well, if you're co-located, I'd just go onto the boards. I would just put sticky notes up. That's why I'm asking. Otherwise, you need some form of digital tool for tracking the work. You don't need a very big one. Just a simple Jira would do. And you get there's free licenses available for Jira. I would look at probably Scrum as a pattern for new people coming into this, because Scrum has mandates around it in terms of what you're going to do. And so as long as you do that and you follow the Scrum mandates, a single team pretty much is guaranteed success, usually about 6 iterations. I work in 2-week iterations, so about within 3 months, you should see a team achieving predictable delivery patterns and have these embedded. You won't need to reinvent as a result. That's the building block. That's the basic building block of delivery. Yeah.
I recommend Paul if you're looking for somebody to help coach. That's good.
Thank you, Christy. Checks in the mail. Anything else? Any other comments here? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and attention. Happy to, if you want to come up afterwards and there's anything you'd like to talk about. Any feedback as well that you have for me. Again, this is a brand new deck. This is my 10-year post-mortem of what I think this is going to take to be successful. I don't think we're heading the right way yet, and I think this is what success will look like. So appreciate your time. Thank you so much.